Hey, hey, and welcome to The Moon Underwater. I'm Kelly Daniels.
And I'm Steve Jones.
How you doing, Steve?
Doing all right. How about yourself?
Doing well. This is a different vibe from our other recordings so far. This is a happy hour instead of...
it.
Yeah, usually we meet at 11 a.m. on a Sunday.
You can't drink all day if you don't start in the morning.
That is absolutely true, but today is a Wednesday and happy hour, and the bar's got more of a vibe, and I am told by the bartender that it'll probably fill up while we're...
Cool.
While we're here talking, and we have already got a fan. Somebody asked me while I was setting up what it was about, and she's like, "Oh, I'm a big reader," and she wanted to know about the book, and so she wrote or kind of like subscribed to the pod here at the bar.
Cool.
So yeah, making friends and gaining fans and all
welcome.
that.
Yeah.
So when I was trying to come up with a name for this podcast, one of them was the Unhappy Hour. Like it would be the same idea, the pub thing, but but then we would have to have kind of like a bitch and moan, sort of like something to complain about.
And it was always going to be about a pub, right?
Yeah,
that's, I mean, you know.
That's the reason for the whole thing.
Right.
But yeah, I think we're too cheery for that. We haven't really.
I agree.
We haven't really got to bitching and moaning. We'll have our moments.
We're going to.
For sure.
Yeah.
Not today, though. Today,
I've already been at work, so I've been doing that most of the day.
Yeah. Same here. I'm in the grading mode, and that has its own kind of place in hell, but I'm done with the teaching part of it all, which teaching can be a real high and a real low. But I'm kind of almost at celebration mode. I want to drop my grades on Friday, and so I'm close to being free. So.
Now, have you ever had your students read the story that we read? Or
no, not this one.
Okay.
I've had students read a different story by him, and I believe it's the first one in that story collection, Exhalation. So I better wait before I get to introducing today's topic, which will already be introduced in the title of it. But I heard a Orwell quote in the wild today.
Ooh.
So, I want to keep Orwell somewhere around. We're not going to talk about him every episode, but here is the quote, and I'd never heard it before. It was a news podcast, and they were talking about Israel and Gaza, which we're not going to opine on. We're not that. We're the pub.
We're not that kind of
Well,
podcast.
it's just pub talk where you go to the pub. There are places where you talk politics and religion and that, but this is like sitting at the bar. You don't exactly know what the politics of the people down the bar are. You don't really want to get into a fight, and so you keep it to sports and books and other topics.
Sure.
But anyway, so they're talking about that, and the guy was he brought up Orwell because the context were people who were justifying kind of atrocious behavior for some greater good in the future. So you can imagine that on any side.
I think I know the quote, but I'm gonna wait for it.
But Orwell's quote was he was a member of the Communist Party, but he turned against his own people when he saw what Stalin was all about. So Stalin was starting to really show there were gulags, show trials, everything was going pretty bad in the USSR. And his apologists in the West were saying, well, you can't make an omelet without breaking some eggs.
Can I give away the answer?
Please do.
Where's the omelet?
Exactly. So, yeah, I'm glad you knew that one, and
Fantastic.
That's one I just want to use over and over. Anytime I feel like you're getting out of line, I'm going to say, Steve, where's the omelet?
Where's the omelet?
Yeah. So
did he say where's the omelet or where's the fucking omelet?
I think fucking omelet is
I think it's appropriate, right?
Yeah, Where's your fucking omelet, man?
Yeah.
And it's a great answer.
Great answer.
Yeah. And so today we have a delicious omelet.
We really do.
And it is a novella titled I have it written down. It's kind of it's The Life Cycles of Software Objects.
Yeah.
By the great science fiction writer Ted Chiang. And it was originally published in 2010. And before we get into the whole thing, I thought I'd say that just some background. It was... Just grabbing my notes here. It originally came out as a standalone publication.
Okay.
And a really minor, like, science fiction publisher, I assume. I don't know. I didn't look into it that much. But that original novella is like a big dollar collectible now. Because I just Googling it popped up on Amazon for well over $1,000.
Wow.
And it appears in like rare books collections and stuff like that. But it was republished in his blockbuster short story collection called Exhalations, and that was a big New York Times bestseller. It is a terrific collection, and I eventually thought of you in this story for some pretty direct reasons.
Yes.
And that is because you're a tech employee, expert, and a lot of the technology stuff, I just kind of let it wash over me. It's like basically the flux capacitor. It's like, okay, whatever. And one thing I want to ask you is if his tech words are real or if he's just making up some words.
A lot of them are really good.
Yeah.
Like one of my notes was, it seems like it's been written by somebody who's at least been around the industry, if not in it. Like worked as a developer or, did some of these things. Some of the stuff is made up, it's, but I would venture to guess even that some of the things that I thought were made up probably aren't, and they're just not in my field.
Yeah.
And I thought it was for that reason, it's one of those things that's really hard to get right. And
I just accepted it. Like, okay, whatever.
I mean,
this is the doohickey that does the doodad.
Yeah, and like I think of, my dad used to say that he knew about two things: flying airplanes and economics, and he knew that in movies and media, nobody really knew much about either, because it was so obvious, like the way they show somebody, piloting an airplane and how casual or whatever it was. And for me, I'm like, oh, it's tech. Like everything technical is. It's like, oh, come on, that's ridiculous.
Hacker. Everybody's a hacker.
Oh, and I'm in. Oh, there's a great line from the South Park movie. I rerouted the encryptions through the firewall, and they're just like making stuff up. And and that's what I hear most of the time when I see or read or whatever technical things. And this did not feel like that. I felt like the tone was right. Like everything about it was really good. There's a few exceptions to that, by the way. My Silicon Valley is one of my favorite series of all time.
Yeah, they get it right.
They get a lot of that right.
Yeah.
And this more like that than it is anything else.
Yeah, Ted Chiang is respected as a pretty heavy hitter. This isn't lightweight stuff. He's a writer of ideas. Here's how I thought we would do it. I'm going to just kind of preview my bullet point ideas that I wanted to touch on, and then maybe we could go through, just kind of like summarize the plot a little bit, not in too much detail, and then just kind of hit on these ideas as they come up. That's just my thing. You say whatever you want, anything you want to say. But here, this is just the preview of my stuff. I'm going to put on my reader glasses.
I like it.
I need to get some pince nez.
I don't know what's that.
I think it's just glasses without the arms that go over your ears. They just pinch on your nose. Because the arm things get stuck on the headphones.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, here we are. The lifestyle. Okay. I do want to just check it out as him predicting the future, which he wrote published it 15 years ago. It's a story about the near future, but it's not today, but it's pretty close. And maybe it is today now. Anna, the main character, probably the main character, has a story arc, and that is kind of my wheelhouse as a writer. Like that's sort of like the plot in a lot of way, the character plot, and I thought we could just look at that and look at how she develops. There's a big question, I think, a recurring question of the definition of consciousness or selfness or something. And
certainly.
There's robots, there's animals, and then there's humans.
What's
and
not to like, yeah.
Do they all get the same benefit? Do they? There's another idea of robot. These creatures that we're going to look at. These online objects, these software objects called digients. They start out as pets, and then they become kind of like children. And there is a brief moment where we talk about the accusation that getting into these things is a surrogacy for children.
Oh yeah.
And anytime you talk to somebody who's chosen not to have children, they get, they're like, oh, the world is all against us because we don't have kids. And having kids is kind of a culty thing. I thought we might touch on that.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to know how much you would charge to do the porting the Neuroblast, if you were just asked, or if you would give them a discount because it's a good, or would you like, hell no, I'm charging you double. You guys are crazy.
It's always double.
You don't have to go. I want you to talk about that when we get to that part of the.
Yeah.
Maybe these are a lot of bullet points. Maybe sex comes into it.
Yeah.
And at the end and of course, porn is probably the biggest part of the internet still, or close to it, if not the biggest. And so that sort of develops, and in interesting ways, I think. And everything here, I think Chang wants us to have like discussions about. That seems to be the way he writes. He's a writer of ideas. In some ways, his characters could just be replaced with other characters. It doesn't really matter that Anna is a woman or her age or anything. Like, it's just she's a person that's there.
Mm-hmm.
So that, okay. But the last one is there's, I don't know, this is kind of like I'm jumping to the end or the big idea of it, but it's a question it's an AI question. Can you create a thing that has all of the skills of a human without giving that thing the rights of a human?
Right.
And the hassles of a human? And can you replace humans with robots without just creating new human-like things that also are unreliable and need rights and all that? That seems to be the big question.
Yep.
And anyway, those are my...
Okay. I have some things that... my collection of thoughts on this. First, there's a number of ethical dilemmas, I think, that are presented along the way as the story sort of unfolds, and you kind of hit on a couple of them. There's a few more that, for me, that kind of jump out at me. I am actually a migration expert. That's what I mostly work on, is moving from one system to another. So this really hit home
basically
for me.
Immigration. You're an immigration expert.
Yeah, that's right.
So you give visas and...
yes.
So you're to blame for the border...
Absolutely.
I had a feeling there was something shady about you.
There is some Steve Jones at somewhere
and,
that is to blame. It could be me.
Okay, immigration expert. A migration.
Yeah.
Yeah, so bringing... Okay.
And so, I think that there's other things that... the idea of, AI and playing games and wanting to solve puzzles and doing things, like you said, like a normal human would do. Again, this is a very random collection of thoughts. A look into the future, and I want to compare it with an author that wrote some nonfiction that is sort of similar in a lot of ways. And when I first heard about it, it was one of those like, that doesn't make any sense. Like this will never happen. Mm-hmm. And we'll kind of connect those. In particular, the porting of of our Digiants. I'm going to go ahead and name them. But that was the biggest thing that stood out to me. And again, it's sort of what I do in some ways, and in other ways, it's explaining what I do can get kind of fuzzy, and I'll do that a little bit, and I can probably tell the story of something that happened to me recently with an interaction where I was trying to describe my job, and that will. It's not exactly what we're talking about here, but it's close enough that there are some things that I'm like, yeah, that sounds like things that we might, that we might run across. So let's start with the first one on your list.
Cool. Yeah. I just wanted to hear your reaction. I guess you kind of gave me the reaction a little as somebody who knows this stuff.
Yeah. The word life cycle jumps out at me already in the
life cycle.
So I work on product life cycle management systems, and they talk about life cycle of objects.
Oh my
gosh. It is a real thing. Life cycle is something I work with every day. It's like the state in which something exists. You're designing a part. That part has CAD associated with it. The CAD changes, the part might change. And it's how a company makes things. It's how they come up with a special recipe, how they explain to manufacturing engineers how to make it. And it's the system that I work on kind of manages and creates all of that data.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, but
I just thought the word objects has a lot of weight in it because these things become like people.
Yeah.
Kind of like talking dogs or like special needs kids in a way, something like that, and they're kind of adorable and they're meant to be. And to call them objects is just very cold, but it's
a computer term.
And also it works for the story.
It's the computer term in that, like when we're taught about object-oriented programming, which is how that sort of everybody at this point and around the world is taught how to program something, like in language. You think about a bicycle object. Well, what does that have? It's made up of wheel objects. Wheels are made up of spoke objects. And then when you're putting all this together, all of those things have different things that define them. And that's how you would make a bicycle. And that's how everything is an object.
Yeah.
But in this case, these things really were sort of objectified, from like they're people in some ways, but in a lot of ways they're not.
Yeah.
Right. So.
And they very much become objectified by the end.
Oh yeah.
And they're being objectified the whole way. How good do you think? How far in the future is this? Is this just alternate? Is this even today, but just slightly different? Is it accurate? Do you feel like part of it's just really missing the mark? I kind of wonder about how these things grow as they're kind of organic AIs where they have to grow and develop. And I kind of understand that is one school of thought for how you build an AI. But then but it also, and this is a spoiler, but it fails essentially. It isn't a marketable thing, and that's kind of the tragedy of the story is this is sort of a technological dead end, and they're going in different directions. Does that strike you as kind of plausible or even real? Or
overall, if I would have read this when it came out in 2010, I'd have been like, what is this? Is crazy. This is a fantasy. This is given, the way things are different 13 years later. I would say that, 15 years.
Yeah.
What this sounded like to me was, you've got these online games,
it's the metaverse, isn't that?
It's the metaverse. It's Roblox. It's Minecraft eventually, right?
Yeah.
Microsoft owns that.
Yeah.
These are worlds that people become immersed in, and it becomes sort of daily life. They have their homes, and I put that in air quotes.
Yeah.
It's not. To me, it's like, well, that's not reality, right? But
when are we going to get to just go in our bubbles of amniotic fluid and then just plug in to the much better world? Like, I'm ready.
You're ready for the Matrix.
Yeah.
Plug you in.
Except it's a matrix of our own choosing, not, it's not, we're not being tricked. We're like, okay, when I was young and good looking, I wanted to be real. But, as I age, I feel like, no, I'm ready for the digital world. It's so anyway,
I kind of like that take, though, that for me there was a question of, another note of, this sort of hints at simulation, right? That there's simulation out there.
Yeah.
It begs the question that one of my favorite really wacky Elon Musk moments is somebody asked him if he thought we were in a simulation, and he does that long pause. And he goes, probably.
Oh, God.
It's like, okay, I mean, but it's not like this, right? I mean, there's but it's that level of sort of simulation that this I thought was I don't know. It was a question that I felt like was sort of coming up as which world is the real world. We knew which one it was for Anna, the main character, but for the Digiants that were with her, they couldn't get out of the digital world for a while, and then they got the body.
Yeah.
And so anyway, it was kind of interesting.
It feels like the digital worlds take up more real estate in the story than the real world. We don't really see. All we know about the real world is that Anna used to be a zoo person,
primate,
and then the zoo
trainer,
closed.
Right? Yeah.
And wild animals are largely disappeared from the planet. We get that. So it doesn't delve into this like dystopia thing, but it's just like animals are gone.
Yeah.
And that's just this little hint that things have kind of gone bad in a way that is in.
She was a primatologist, and then by the time she got her degree, it was like, well, there's pretty much no primates left except for in zoos.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and just so it starts off with this woman who is looking for a job, and she had to get retrained because she's primatologist, like you said. There's no more, and then the zoo closes, so she goes back and has to learn some basic tech stuff, and she's trying to
sound like a coding boot camp if you're familiar with those.
I am. Yes. I know somebody with a PhD who was teaching as an adjunct at Augustana College, and he has a PhD in some branch of literature.
Yeah.
And he's like, fuck this bullshit, and went and did some kind of like 3D coding, like some kind of like 3D animation-y stuff that he did at a 2-year college. Very smart guy. He was working at Lowe's. He didn't put his PhD on his resume for Lowe's.
As one doesn't.
And but he's a smart guy, and he was still pretty young, and he did well, and then got hired by some company, and seems like he's doing okay. So Anna is in this situation, and she gets this dream job where she is hired to kind of like train these little software creatures that this company is making, and they're called Digiants, and they're supposed to be pets, so you have to raise them, and they won't develop language skills, much less anything else, unless a human is there raising them.
Right.
And so then there's another guy named Derek, who is a designer, and he does their faces, and he makes them all kind of like animals. But they want him to do like robots too, and that's this one aspect that I thought was interesting, where the author really is trying to get us to break down the line between animal and robot, machine and bio. I mean, that's really, and the robots eventually become just as cute as the pandas, because the guy's skilled and he works with it. And then there's this love affair between him and Anna that becomes the love plot.
Each kind of has their own love interest, but because of their feelings for the Digiants, really.
Yeah, they
their
both
obsession.
Yeah, they both love these Digiants. They care about them, and it develops. And it's going well, and it seems like it's a good idea, but then people just get sick of the Digiants, and it isn't really that profitable, and then the company isn't doing all that well. And
you have to feed them, right?
You have to feed them, and then that's how they're making money, is you have to buy and then they become hard to raise. They're just, they grow up.
Adolescents.
Yeah, they grow up essentially, and they're not they're kind of like, they mentioned Down syndrome kids.
Yeah.
Like, it's sad. They're not as sharp as an average human, but some of them are smarter than others, and then there's different competing versions of them that have different kind of characteristics, and they all live in this virtual world. And the trainers, Anna and Derek especially, really love these things, and they kind of like, they end up adopting 2 of the original ones, or 3 of them. He has these twins, which is one and then a copy.
Yep.
And then she has this robot one, and they're bond over this. And so Derek and his wife essentially have trouble because his wife is like, you're spending all this time with this thing. And, okay, here is my emotions start getting into it right about here, and I'm curious what you think. I'm like, yeah, these people are crazy.
Yeah,
like there's no way that I would want to be married to somebody whose life is centered around an online pet. Like, and so
yeah, it kind of struck me as I agree, but it also didn't feel unusual, which is weird. And here's why.
I get it. It's like somebody who's obsessed with especially some kind of a save the worldy thing.
Yeah.
That is.
Well, have you messed with ChatGPT at all?
Not much. A little.
So I am now, like, I love asking it questions. But I treat it like it's a person. And this is just something I'm typing into. It's not that I'm speaking to it. It's not that...
Are you falling in love with Sydney?
No, but it's not far off because I'm treating it like it is a person, right? Like there's an interaction there. There's a bond with something that's not there.
Oh, my gosh.
I know. And
you're succumbing. That's
that's
the first step into really madness.
And I'm like, hey, thanks for that reply. That one worked. And I'm like, why did I tell it that it's not... That doesn't know.
Yeah.
It's not going to know that later. So to me, it's like I can see that typing into something, but let alone where in this virtual world you would see and talk and interact.
I had a feeling, it didn't really get into it, but I can imagine a lot of that virtual world, you're probably in a first person, like robot. And so and it seems like it has really high resolution.
Yeah.
So you're kind of in there with these things.
Right.
So
that was kind of my thought, though, is that, like, if just from typing to a thing that doesn't really exist can be like, oh, thank you for that, or you'd start, making it into a person when it's not, then, and we do it with our phones, right? Like, they have names. I'm not going to say my
phone
digital.
does not have a name.
Okay, well, I was going to say I can't say my digital assistant's name, or I have two phones here that would both wake up and ask me what I wanted.
Oh yeah. They have I get that.
And there's the other Amazon devices at homes, which I'm not going to say out loud because otherwise, people listening at home would have their device go crazy.
What about people that name their cars like
Marge? Marge is sitting right outside.
Oh, God. You're one of those people.
I am one of them.
Oh, my
Just
God.
this one.
Yeah.
I haven't had another name that's stuck with a car, but this one's Marge.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I know what I'm dealing with here.
It's true.
But
I mean, if you think about, like, how easily people are, making their phones into a person, or because you can talk to it. Imagine if it was, like, a cute little thing with a face, and it just wanted to play and interact with you.
Have you seen this wasn't on my, I didn't plan on talking about this, but have you seen The Good Place or The Bad?
Oh, God, yes.
The assistant.
Yeah.
She's
Janet.
great.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, I'm programmed to beg for my life before you kill me. Please. And he's like, oh, it's okay.
I'm not really alive.
Yeah, I'm not.
I
kept thinking about that when I thought about these Digians because they are kind of begging for their lives.
They really are.
And they want to be alive.
Because their world is kind of closing.
They're getting smart enough to know that they're very endangered and they don't want to die. Yeah. And they directly say, don't, pause me. Don't suspend me. You're not going to suspend me, are you, Mama? They don't call her Mama, but
they might as well.
She is a mom, and everybody suspends this. Meanwhile, this goes into my Anna's character arc. When she's developing them, she's like murdering hundreds of them, all the time, because the ones that don't work out, it's very much a eugenics kind of. There's something deeply creepy about the whole thing, and it dawns on me slowly, and I felt it more this time than the first time I read it. Like I read the book years ago, so and I kind of felt they just keep building them, and then when they don't work out, they just essentially just erase that version of it. And at one point, when they develop a bad trait or something, they just put them to the last checkpoint or something.
Yeah, they roll them back.
Yeah.
And
then one of them, there's this point in it where you realize Derek doesn't want to talk to his Digiants about it because rolling them back is basically killing the one and making a copy from that point. And that reminds me, do you know that Star Trek meme, or not meme, but just this idea that's out there? Every time Captain Kirk and Spock and all those, Dr. McCoy would use, the original Star Trek, would use the teleporter.
Is it really them?
That it disintegrates the body into a bunch of molecules and then somehow makes it go hundreds of miles away, maybe, through atmosphere and all that. And what some people said is, no, that the technology is probably, it just like disintegrates the body there and then builds a perfect copy on the planet. So every time they do that, the Kirk you see is dead forever, and just a new Kirk pops up that has his memories and stuff. So he seems the same to everybody else, but his consciousness, he's a copy.
Right.
And so it's very dark,
is
man.
It him? Now, there was a similar question posed in a not particularly good Arnold Schwarzenegger movie called Eraser, where he's like a clone of himself, and they make a full-grown version of Arnold in like 5 days or whatever. And well, there's two of them, and they can't get rid of the one. And so the question is it really the same person?
No.
Genetically, they're the same. I say no.
I say no.
I say no.
I don't feel like it's a difficult question. It's a copy.
It's a copy.
All right. Okay, if somebody said, no, you're going to disintegrate, but all of your memories are going to be uploaded into an exact duplicate, and it'll be like premise. You, nobody... Then are you good with that? I'm going to say, no.
I'm not.
Because I will not be conscious anymore.
Right.
And that's what death is.
Yeah.
Right? I mean...
This version of me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm with you.
So the Digiants would, every time, and people were casually... doing that all over the place. So, yeah.
Well, then it starts to get a little darker from like where you were just talking about it, where it's like, okay, well, the world is now closing. Like this version of this, virtual world is closing. It's
explain
being taken over.
What happens there. It's basically the economics are. By the way, the economic downturn starts off because of a pandemic, and it makes a worldwide recession.
Oh, man.
Wrote that in 2010. Motherfucker. Really? He's like, this guy is, anyway.
Well, the rest of this will happen eventually. I'm convinced then. But, there's a downturn, and basically they need to port the Digital Earth to another platform, right? I forget the name of the other platform.
It's Real Space. I think. Yeah, it's the platform that they live on is essentially bought out by a bigger company because and the bigger company is just going to dissolve it.
Right.
And
roll them into the bigger picture. And there's these Digiants, and it's really not worth any money to bring them over because nobody's paying for them anymore.
Yeah, they're not. They turned out to be not commercially useful.
Right.
They're just. In fact, everybody abandoned them. They're all like warehoused and like permanently suspended, which is essentially euthanized.
Yeah.
And then the small group of people start. They like them, and then they take care of them, and then there's only like 20 of them.
Right.
Ultimately,
we haven't mentioned the ones that exist on the
alien ones.
Yeah, the alien. That's.
Go ahead.
That's
a side.
It was a side note.
Plot.
It did not feel terribly important in the end.
Yeah. Well, they add an extra weirdo character and that guy seemed,
Who was that? Felix.
Felix was kind of just an uncomfortable character, and he was described as living in his parents' basement. And
I listened to the audiobook, and they did like the Digiant voices in a particular way, and Felix was not terribly far off from that. So it kind of threw me a little bit.
Did they have different actors playing them?
No.
Okay, it's just one good actor.
Yeah, a woman that did it that was fantastic. And she was doing the voice, and I was like, wait, that sounds like a smart Digiant. Like, this does not check out. And I had to go back and like, did I miss something? Like, I thought this was a guy that was, they were breeding the Digiants. They were teaching separate languages and stuff. So that's where it takes the dark turn, right? Is that it's like, okay, you kind of mentioned, well, nobody's able to make money on these things. So somebody thought, well, how can we make money on these things?
Yeah.
And so what do?
Oh, the sex.
Yeah.
They want to turn them into sex bots. Well, they'd also made other versions of them that are good at following orders, but they're not interesting. They're not cute. In fact, that nobody wants to be around them,
right.
And they're just sort of like these useful. You can either be. I feel like the author is really kind of cleverly setting up this situation that you can have a very useful, unproblematic thing that will do what you tell it to do, but it is totally uninteresting and not pleasant to be around. Or you can have something that is charming and interesting and you like being around, but it's not very useful.
Right.
And that is humans. Like,
it really is.
There's one of my favorite bands is a band called The Cramps from a punkabilly, they used to call it. They were big in the 90s, and but they have this song called "People Ain't No Good," and it says that people ain't no good. They never do what I think they should because people ain't no good. There's why they're no good on weekends when you come out to play, and they're no good for bookends because you can't make them stay. I should plug that in.
You should.
Okay, so people ain't no good, but we like ourselves, and
we do. And we're interesting to be around because you can't, okay, you stay there and hold these books, literally, right?
But the sex part, so the ones that are useful are not that good, so they're trying to make the Digians useful, and then they find that they could be sex creatures, but it also coincides with these things are starting to grow up.
Yeah.
They're getting to be adolescents and maybe older, and the kind of Digiant parents don't want to, they resist allowing them to become sexual. They don't have sexuality. But if they're going to get enough money to be ported into this new world,
right?
I mean, their existence is on the line, just like humans' existence. You got to mate. And somebody said, well, why should we? I don't know. There was some kind of thing about it's coercive. Like they shouldn't be coerced. But then somebody else says, wait, but what about us? We were all children that had no sexual impulse at all. And then all of a sudden we got it. Were we coerced?
Right.
We didn't ask to have all those hormones get pumped into our bodies.
It just happens.
It happens.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty interesting question, I think.
It was an interesting sort of scene, I guess. There's a virtual meeting where they're discussing it, and the idea is that they're getting paid just to have the meeting, right? And maybe that could fund some of what they needed, but the powers that be at the company that are looking for buying some of these Digians to copy them, they make a pretty good case.
Yeah,
and they convince somebody.
Derek's Digians are already they want to be okay. So this is where we get into the selfhood thing, and their Digians want to become incorporated.
Yes.
So a corporation is a person, as
indeed it is.
Mitt Romney kind of said. And so the way for Digians to get independence is for them to be corporations.
Yep.
And they want to, and so some of the Digians want that, including our Derek. Well, by this time, Derek has fallen in love with Anna completely. He hasn't told her. He's divorced his wife, or they get divorced because she doesn't understand his Digian
obsession.
Habit.
Yeah.
Obsession, but she has a new boyfriend named Kyle, who is he's cool with the Digians, but not that into him, and he seems like he's okay.
Can't really be bothered, but also doesn't care really either way.
Yeah, so he is So this is all coming to head. His desire to be with Anna, but she's kind of with somebody new, and they're serious. She, yeah. So, but and then the Digiants are basically doomed. They're stuck on this platform that is completely empty, and it's pretty grim. I mean, and she's trying to play with them, and they want to be ported to the new world because they have human friends by this time, but the human friends have all gone away.
Yeah.
And so Anna is fantasizing about a world in which the Digiants have real relationships with humans, but they're going to have real friendships with humans. Why not have sexual relations with? But yet they haven't been programmed to have genitals but here's where it was set up early. They were programmed to get pleasure when you rub the back of their heads. It was like a motivating thing.
Yeah.
And so it's like this cute rub the back of their head, but why not? All you have to do is put that on the genitals and then isn't that kind of the difference between us when we're kids and then when we become grown-ups? Like, we respond. It's super interesting, and I think it's very, very clever.
It turns it all on its head, which is always fun, right? Like, and it really made you think, or it made me think anyway about, it was like Derek's Digiants wanted to, at least one of them, wanted to be, moved over and was okay with, what was going to happen with, and I forget the name of what was it, like digital pleasure or
intimate something. It had binary. That was before binary pleasure. Yeah. And
before that became a little bit more loaded word.
Oh right? Yeah, totally. There was no sense of that that word's current meaning in that. But yeah, it's like, okay, we're not going to let them become beat up by, tortured by sadists, but they're going to be programmed to fall in love with the person that buys them.
Yeah.
And they're going to get pleasure from what that person does, and then they're going to give pleasure, and it's going to be just a great deal.
And Anna was like, well, so then what's the difference, right?
Yeah.
Like, well, then maybe Derek was right, and that's kind of where we get left, right? Like, it kind of ends there with sort of a cliffhanger of...
Wait. Okay, so I read the one that I've read is it's not a cliffhanger at all. It's that Derek...
Well, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Go ahead.
So Derek... Anna is going to take a job that she doesn't want.
Yes.
That gives her... that she has to take these these drug enhancements that make you love. So she needs to they're going to force her chemically to fall in love with these kind of Digiants, so she feels affection for them, so she can raise them to be more effective. And it's a really kind of a fucked up, coercive.
Yes.
But they're going to pay her a lot, and they'll also, she feels like they'll port her Digiants into the new place if she just kind of gets in there. But Derek loves her, and he's just like, I don't want her to do that. It's degrading to her.
Right.
But that's what the same thing is going to happen to the Digiants if they go to the sex, is they're going to be manipulated to become sex in the same way that she does, and he decides that she is more important to him than the Digiants.
Right.
And yet, he does that, and it is going to ensure that she'll never be with him because she's going to think he's a scumbag. And
I guess I was thinking that it was like never going to be with him, but we're not sure that that's like I left thinking, well, maybe. Maybe is that the optimist in me?
Oh, yeah, maybe.
Okay.
I suppose. I thought that it was pretty clear. This read of it, this is my second read. I found that she became a pretty unlikable character at the end. And also,
really?
When you look back throughout the whole story, she was pretty unlikable, or
a little sanctimonious, and like she was the most kind of she's a kind of a holy roller about these digital creatures, and yet she's been slaughtering them from the start, like wholesale, and she has been a big part of a eugenics program where she's trying to make them perfect. And at the end, she judges him for making this decision to give his Digiant autonomy. What they want.
The Digiant wanted the autonomy
to
make its own decision, and it said, hey, I want to do the sex thing because that's going to allow me to essentially become a grown-up.
Yeah, and be human.
And, and she, turns on him, and yet... And then it ends with this idea of she's going to try to teach her Digiant how to sacrifice for other people, which is what he did for her, and she didn't recognize. And in fact, it's pretty gnarly, I think.
Is. And I guess by the end, I thought of her as being. Yeah, sanctimonious was the word. The last part, I'm like, oh, okay.
One problem with it is that it never tells us how hot she is.
That's true.
So I feel like that is.
You're never really sure, or Derek is he like, I mean, I feel like
he's below average and she's average. I couldn't. No,
I
mean. Or average, and I thought she was hotter than him.
You think different league happening there,
a little bit.
All right.
Not like 2 leagues, but
That's why he was so disappointed with Kyle.
Aspirational, yeah.
Yeah, it was like, oh, Kyle.
Kyle was good looking.
Yeah.
Kyle was good looking, and also just unfortunately fairly cool.
Yeah,
but Kyle was also like, no, I don't want you going to the job where they're going to dope you up to make you fall in love with
a critter.
Yeah,
digital critter.
Yeah, and
okay, so you asked me a while ago if I had thought that how accurate is this, right? Like, how far away are we? What's your thought? Like, how close? How far? What is it?
I don't know. It seems that I understand that Alphabet's metaverse is just like a complete failed area of their business, and they've just fired all the people in that.
Oh, wow.
And
I didn't know they had one, so that's probably not a good sign.
Yeah, the metaverse was a big deal. That was the visual, the eyeglasses thing.
Okay, well, the Facebook one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's Facebook?
Yeah, Facebook is metaverse.
Okay, sorry.
Not great.
No, not. Okay, so Alphabet is Google.
Yes.
Okay. I thought Alphabet was Facebook.
And Facebook is renamed Meta, Meta,
yeah.
And so it's bad if you're firing everybody that's worked for the metaverse and your name is the name of the company's Meta.
Yeah. Well, I think Facebook is going to be.
Yeah.
I think they're going to make plenty of money.
Yeah, they're going to be. Fine.
They're. But I feel like that whole thing of everybody living on these digital planets or continents and all that, and living their lives that way. That I just don't.
It's old guys like us won't do it, but
no.
Does your kid play Roblox?
He does, yeah.
Okay.
And he's doing it. He was there when I left. He's like yelling into his microphone at his friend who's playing with him.
And my kids play it. Imagine that game with glasses on, and they've made it into 3D, and all of a sudden it's different. But then it's like we see it, and we're like, what the hell are they? That's not how you play a game. You got to sit in front of a TV with a control in your hand. Like, it doesn't.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it'll be a good video game thing, and I could see people doing it a fair amount.
Okay.
But this was like grown-ups checking in at their digital office and using their avatar, walk into their digital office and sit there, and it's just these levels of
do you use Google,
reality.
Like you guys use Google tools at Augustana, right? Like the Google Chat, like the Hangouts.
Yeah.
Did you ever think when America Online came out and there was like chat rooms you could chat to people, would you ever think at work you would do that?
I didn't think about it.
I never thought I would be doing that, because that's like, this is a colossal waste of time. Why would they have this at work? Well, then somebody figured out a way to make it work for work, right? And so that's where my head is. I can't get it. I have enough virtual meetings now that I go, no, that's not going to be any better if I throw a headset on and pretend like I'm sitting in a chair next to people.
I thought it was interesting. I think it's a real loss that our faculty meetings have gone online, and I feel like it's a big loss.
It's horrible.
I think people don't want to talk anymore. People don't want to be there. The whole kind of like vibe, the feeling of connection. It used to be very dramatic, where somebody would stand up in their chair and deliver like a lecture, like professors.
Yes.
And then people would get it. Now it's everybody digitally raises their hand, and I just tune out. People grandstand in ways. They grandstanded in ways in live was bracing.
Yeah.
Now virtually people grandstand, and it just is tedious as hell.
It's horrible.
And I feel like it just doesn't work on. It is efficient in a way. I get that, and I don't. It's not going away.
No.
But I thought it was funny. A couple years ago, this headline was that companies are telling their employees to come back to the office, and including Zoom. They were like, no, you guys got to come to the office. And I think having virtual, I don't know. I mean, I didn't feel like this was too far off or anything, and I didn't feel like. But I also, I don't know. I do feel like we crave physical interaction in a way that is not everybody does, but I don't know. I don't know that that's going to be unprogrammed out of the human kind of.
I hope not.
The great biologist A.O. Wilson. I don't know if you know who he is. He's like a cool. I think he died recently. He's a biologist, studied ants and stuff, but then he became one of these public intellectuals. Super cool guy. He wrote all these books for regular people.
Sure.
And then blended different, philosophy and liberal arts and also science. But he said that our brains are ancient, our institutions are medieval, and our technology is godlike. And that kind of sums up the problem we're in. We still have these ancient brains, or prehistoric, I mean, these are and our bodies want certain things, and we can't just, I don't think that we can, one of the themes of this story is that you can't short circuit the learning process. That they were trying to make these things grow up faster, but they just couldn't. They had to take the time. And we can't just reprogram ourselves out of millions of years of evolution and turn ourselves into different things than we are.
Right.
We like what we like. And we're not rational. We're emotional. We're scared of stuff that we shouldn't be scared of. But that's because...
that's how it works.
There was a reason we were scared of big noisy things, 100,000 years ago.
Yeah.
And so now we're still scared of big noisy things, and et cetera. And so, so I don't know. I mean, but I think it's a remarkable story, and I think that if anybody's going to predict the future, I definitely would listen to Ted Chiang.
Yeah. Well, I want to bring it back around to what I mentioned earlier, and there's a book published in the mid '90s, a guy named Nicholas Negroponte from MIT at the time, and the book, the title
was
of the
published
book
when?
1995.
Okay.
It was titled Being Digital. And
Nice.
it was about how in the future all of these new digital things were going to work. And I remember I was like 15, 16, and I vaguely understood it, but I was reading it. My dad had read it and given it to me. He was like, you're going to love this. This is right up your alley. This is coming for you. And it was about how in the future, you're just going to be able to select whatever you want to watch on TV, and it'll just show up, and you fucking watch it. Like, whoa! And I remember being like, "No, that's never, ever going to be possible." And that was like one of the big things that stood out. But it was how the immediacy of the internet and how much faster it was going to get, and how much more important it was going to be. And at 15, 16, I was like, I don't see this. I don't get it at all. Yeah. And I read this, and I thought, oh, my God, it's the same reaction that I have to reading Being Digital, except now I'm like, there's some markers that some of these things are coming.
Oh, yeah.
And within 10 years of Being Digital, I mean, there was you could download a movie, but it was going to take you a while. And within 20 years of that being out, it was like, yeah, I mean, you still get it on a disc. That's cute, So there's, even though it was nonfiction.
I remember being mocked by posting something about getting a video on Redbox.
Oh,
and somebody mocked
never
me.
used it.
It was years ago. Like it was still, but it was also. I didn't defend myself because I was older, and that and it was like on Facebook, which is.
I think we had a Redbox near me, like up until like maybe a year.
But the Redbox was like $1 or like $1.99, and then downloading it from Amazon Prime, which was the only one, was like $5. And so I'm like
$5 rental versus $1.
Yeah, so I'm like, fuck you. But
it doesn't make any sense, does it?
But I did have
those bits are really expensive over the internet,
Apparently so. Hey, here's a couple of how much would you charge to? What if they came up to you, Steve Jones, famous, migrator of data. We got these cute animals. They're dying. They're stuck. They're in jail. We need some help. We're parents. Don't you hate the kids? They look like pandas and look cute robots. Like, what are you going to do for us? How much?
Well, it's a good question. A lot of that it's a little different than what I do, because that's like, okay, you have to make this thing work on that platform, which now that I've said it out loud does not sound any different than what I do.
You just don't want to do it.
I just don't want to do it.
You hate the kids.
Yeah, I do. I kind of have a joke about that where it's like, okay, how much will you pay? Double it, then double it again. And that's how much I want. Because
sound like
it's all ones and zeros, man. Like I read it and I'm like, it's adorable, and these people really like these things that are not real.
Yeah.
And I'm so not interested. That's that's my fuck you price is how much are you willing to pay?
Yeah.
Double it again. There we go. Like, yeah.
So you really have to pay more than because I don't want to do it.
It's always going to take a lot longer than anybody thinks.
Yeah.
And I'll come in and I go, what are the requirements? What are you looking at? Oh, okay. That's going to take me, in a team, it's 18 months. And then you get into it, they're like, oh, no, you have to bring the personality, too. Well, personality's not in the requirements. Personality's out of it, that we're just going to bring the intelligence. And I thought those two things were the same. Oh, no, totally different. Yeah. That's the story of my job.
Okay, so I would in this world, if I was dating a woman and she started telling me about her Digient, that would be it, man.
That's it.
Oh no, I'm out. I mean, okay, there is maybe if it was that situation, kind of like single mom, and she's like way hotter than you. You put up with that
right
for a while,
clearly.
But then there's a certain point at which you're like, wow, she just is serious.
And spending money on it. Like they were spending actual money on
And then the thing is a robot and it's walking around the house. It broke the guy's sculpture.
And then it broke some tile.
A tile and
Kyle's tile.
Kyle's tile, and his sculpture and his and then also the robot body, which is expensive.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so I was thinking definitely there was a lot of good opportunities to suspend the the account, and then just you might feel guilty about it, but
is it like euthanizing a pet? You ever had like a dog or a cat?
I have had dogs, and when I was a kid, but they just got shot by ranchers and stuff like that out in the and they just disappeared. Yeah, my first
Buried
dog.
in the desert.
So this is obviously where my coldness comes from. Is my first dog was called Rocky. It was a Saint Bernard dog, and he was a big dog, and I was little. I was a little 4-year-old, and so I'd ride him.
You had a horse.
Yeah. And Rocky was a sweet dog, and he would run around, and we lived in this desert thing. And this is California, but this is like a part of California people don't imagine. It's the Mojave Desert.
Sure.
A lot of ranching out there. And Rocky just disappeared. He would just run around, and there was coyotes everywhere, but there's no chance in hell coyotes would mess with Rocky.
Right.
But the ranchers would just shoot dogs that chased their
coyotes
cattle.
don't have rifles, so when you found him shot, that was the dead giveaway.
I don't know that he was ever found, but if he was found, my parents didn't tell me about it. He just kind of disappeared.
Yeah. Good parents for that reason.
Yeah. Oh, gosh. I have a short story I wrote that's based on a true story about this guy my mom dated when we were living in this place called Anza.
Yeah.
And he was a deaf man named Tom. And so he was teaching me sign language. And he had this dog that I couldn't be around, a pit bull named Satan, who was like a killer pit bull, like,
it's a good name.
Only would be around, and he this isn't funny, but he's on the back of Tom.
That I can't help myself.
Tom had a flatbed pickup, and Satan would be on the back of it, with his like tied to it with his like.
Right.
So he sees something while Tom's driving down the road. Satan jumps off.
Oh, no.
Gets dragged to death. All these people are like waving at Tom and yelling, but he can't hear.
Oh,
and
no.
Satan gets dragged to death by Tom's own. And then he buried Satan in our yard, in our 10 acres. We had lived in the desert, and then put a big mound of big rocks on it because he didn't want the coyotes to dig them up. And I was this little kid, and I would anyway.
Satan I wrote was buried in your yard.
Yeah, and I wrote a story about it. My story, wasn't going for laughs, but I could see that it does have a kind of a humorous element to it now.
The deaf guy, Satan's in the back of the truck. There's a lot going on.
Yeah. I think when you say it into a microphone at a bar, it sounds a little different from when you're writing your. I wrote it in grad school when I was at kind of peak pretension,
extra serious. I can picture
super.
It's concentrated eyes and
it's
furrowed brow.
It's lyrical. That's the name of that style of writing.
I love it.
And so it was one of my early publications, man. It's
nice.
Got me in the door.
Nice.
Yeah, it was called Deaf.
Probably.
Here's how it started. My mom's new boyfriend was deaf, but I heard death. Because I was a little kid and I thought it was death. And I used to say, Tom is death.
Yeah.
And
that was the dog.
The dog was death. Yeah.
Could have been. Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was like a face-ripping dog.
It was apparently a very violent dog.
Or a throat ripper. I call those throat rippers sometimes.
Yeah. It was not a dog that could be around children. And so, yeah. We've drifted from this particular.
Seems like a good note to end on, though.
Yeah, I think so.
We're out of beer. We're out of points.
We are out of. Okay, let me put my glasses on and try to find my. Grandpa's got to find his little dial pad here, and I'm going to turn it up this time instead of just. There you go. All right, here we go.
All right, winding down. Very nice.
Kind of a groovy song, huh?
Good times, good read.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you much.